Area 5, Law. The following pages present suggestions that pertain to what a victim of racism, non-white person, should, or should not choose to do in the fifth major area of people activity. Each person should choose to speak and or act according to one or more of the suggestions presented, but only if he or she decides to do so. No person should speak and or act according to any suggestion presented herein unless he or she has judged that the suggestion chosen is of current and correct value in helping to eliminate racism, white supremacy, and or in helping to better produce justice. It is important to know and understand that one or more suggestions selected from one major area of people activity should be used in constructive combination with one or more suggestions selected from other major areas of people activity. If an individual person chooses to utilize any suggestion presented herein, he or she should do so in a manner, and at a specific time, and specific place, that will produce the most constructive results in the revelation of truth, and or the production of justice or correctness, regardless of what you may have been told. Expect, at all times, to be mistreated as a result of so-called laws and or legal systems that you are involved in, and or subject to, during the existence of the system of white supremacy, racism. Do not expect truth to be revealed or used in a manner that results in justice, and or correctness, through so-called lawmaking that is directly or indirectly dominated by racist men and or racist women, white supremacists, collectively. At best, expect only the expressions of so-called concern or sympathy. According to compensatory logic, a law is anything that is done. This means that every time any police person does anything, he or she is practicing, enacting, enforcing etc., a law of whatever it is that is being done. It is important to know and to understand that law is not the same as justice. In a known universe dominated by the non-just and incorrect acts of people, it is best and correct not to use the word police to apply to any person now in existence. It is best and correct to use the terms law enforcer, law enforcement officer, law enforcement official, etc. The terms are best and correct because of what a law is. Justice is that which is done that results in no person being mistreated, plus that which is done that results in the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Laws are a combination of things done that may, or may not result in the establishment of justice. Study the laws, acts, that are made by people that you are involved with, and produce ways of using those same laws in a manner that best promotes the production of justice and correctness, balance between all people, creatures, things, etc. Two basic goals of correct law enforcement: 1. To produce justice, and 2. To eliminate injustice. Explanation. Laws change, but justice remains the same. A law is a tool. A law is a tool that can be used to produce and or maintain justice. A law can also be used as a tool to produce and or maintain injustice. Any law that is enforced by people in a manner that does not promote the production of justice, and or is enforced in such a manner that does not help to produce justice, is a non-law. Any person who enforces a non-law is acting as an outlaw, and should not be allowed to enforce any law. If a system produces injustice, then the rules that maintain the system are incorrect, even though these same rules, if used to maintain a just system, would be correct rules. White supremacy, racism, is an incorrect system that promotes injustice. Any person who willfully helps to establish, maintain, expand, and or refine a condition of white supremacy, or who, if able, does not, at all times, strive to speak and or act against the condition, is a criminal, and or an agent of criminals. All comforts that come to any white person as a direct or indirect result of the practice of white supremacy, racism, are comforts unjustly received. All white people who practice racism, white supremacy, directly or indirectly, are equal to each other in that practice. This is true because each individual act of racism is interrelated with all other acts of racism. This means that all white people, who practice racism in any form, are equally as guilty as those white people who practice racism in all forms. Racist men and racist women, white supremacists, collectively, by functioning as the white nation, and by acting to maintain, expand, and or refine the existence of racism have, more than any other creatures in the known universe, violated the natural law of compensation. By doing so, they have deliberately forced, and or directed all other creatures, particularly non-white people, to do the same. Question: what are the duties of a correct law enforcement officer? Answer: 1. The basic duty of a correct law enforcement officer is to have the correct intentions. 2. The basic duty of a law enforcement officer who has the correct intentions is to use every law, act, in such a manner as to help produce justice, balance between people. 3. The basic duty of a law enforcement officer who uses law, act, in such a manner as to help produce justice, is to guarantee that no person is mistreated, and to guarantee that the person who needs help the most gets the most constructive help. Notes: do not apply the word police to any person who is brutal. Do not apply the word police to any person who is a racist, white supremacist, or a racist suspect, suspected white supremacist. Do not apply the word police to any person who enforces any law in such a manner that justice, balance between people, is not the result. Instead, use the term a law enforcement officer to any person who is said to be, directly or indirectly, assigned to enforce the law, including any law that is, in effect, correct or incorrect. Every person in the known universe acts as a law enforcement officer because every person is at all times enforcing some form of law. Example: the law of compensation. Avoid using the term police to describe any person now in existence. Use the term enforcement officials to describe any person who uses force to enact the will of those who have dominant power. Never refer to a police officer as being a racist. Explanation: it is not possible for any person to be a police person, police officer, policeman, or policewoman and, at the same time, be a racist. Police are people who seek and find truth, and who use the truth in such a manner as to produce justice and correctness, at all times and in all areas of activity. Racists, however, are people who practice white supremacy. White supremacy is the promotion of falsehood, non-justice, and or incorrectness based on factors associated with the color or non-color of people. Law is anything that is done. A police person does not do anything in a manner that helps to produce or maintain non-justice. Therefore, in a known universe in which justice, balance between people, does not exist, there is no evidence that police exist. What does exist are law enforcement officers. Keep in mind that a law enforcement officer is not, necessarily, a police officer. A police officer is a person who, at all times, speaks and acts in a manner that always results in justice being produced and or maintained. A law enforcement officer, however, is a person who enforces a law in such a manner as to make that law effective. The law, act, that is enforced, however, may or may not help to produce justice. In a known universe in which justice does not exist, no person can truthfully claim to be, or correctly be regarded as, a police officer. No law among the people of the known universe has resulted in the establishment of justice, according to compensatory counter-racist logic. It is impossible for a white supremacist to be a police officer, or for a police officer to be a white supremacist. The correct term for a law enforcement officer who practices white supremacy, racism, is a suspected race soldier, suspected racist, or suspected white supremacist. Police do not commit brutality. Incorrect law enforcement officers do commit brutality. An incorrect law enforcement officer is any person who speaks or acts in such a manner that produces or maintains non-justice, non-balance between people, while in the presence of law enforcement persons, and in your general interactions with them. Do the following. 1. Be as calm and as courteous as you possibly can. 2. Answer all questions in a manner that is calm and constructive. 3. If you are not absolutely certain of the answer to a question, say that you are not sure. 4. Do not use any profane language. And 5. Do not do anything, or say anything, that may cause a greater problem. Police officers always suspect that a white person is a white supremacist, racist, if he or she approaches you with a weapon. As long as white supremacy, racism, exists, expect to be maimed, killed, or falsely accused by any white person who confronts you by presenting himself or herself as some form of law enforcement official, police person, sheriff, constable, investigator, soldier, etc. Explanation. There are many white people who identify themselves as officers of the law and who believe in racism, white supremacy. There are many white people who have death-making weapons, who have the correct intentions. There are many who do not. If a white person says that he or she is a police officer, but speaks or acts in a manner that indicates that he or she is not a police officer, but a white supremacist, racist, consider him or her a suspected race soldier, a suspected white supremacist, who pretends to be a police officer. If a non-white person says that he or she is a police officer, but speaks or acts in a manner that indicates that he or she is not a police officer, but a person who is using force to help a suspected race soldier to enforce the practice of white supremacy, racism, it is correct to use the term victim of white supremacy to apply to that non-white person. The term law and order has been used by the white supremacists, racists, in a manner that helps to disguise the action, practice, of white supremacy, racism. If you are confronted by a suspected race soldier pretending to be a police officer, immediately go into danger mode. Regard yourself as being captured and a completely helpless prisoner of war. Explanation. As a prisoner of war, it is best to act as if you are a soldier, captured in greatly fortified enemy territory. If confronted by a suspected race soldier, consider yourself as being captured, because you have been, as a non-white person, in most situations, you are regarded as a criminal, a dangerous animal, an enemy soldier, an escaped convict, a savage, etc. Your existence is in danger. Try to instantly remember that in every tense or hostile situation between you and a suspected race soldier, you most likely will be immediately killed. Suggestions. If confronted by a suspected race soldier, do not do anything to make that officer believe that you will not comply. Everything that you say should be, yes sir or yes ma'am, or no sir, or no ma'am, and always, do what you are told to do. If you are told to put your hands up, put your hands up. If you are told to get on the ground, get on the ground. Do not argue, fight, resist, name call, or talk about your rights. You may explain that later. Do not make any quick moves or give reason to believe you are being aggressive or not complying. Be courteous, and do your best to be cooperative. Avoid doing or saying anything that will give them an excuse to legally do bodily harm to you. Keep in mind that during the existence of white supremacy, racism, any white person who is able to be a racist, white supremacist, probably is one. Know and understand that, as such, he or she is capable of doing great harm to you, and that he or she has the greater advantage. Any move that you make just may be your last. Speak and act as if you know this. Do not pretend that you have power. In this situation, the logic tells you that you do not have. Do not mistakenly believe that you can exercise your rights, or show your so-called power by not cooperating. You are going to lose. The record shows that. What is the statute of limitations on justice? There is no statute of limitations on justice. No matter when or when injustice exists, it should be immediately replaced with justice. Note. During the existence of the system of white supremacy, racism, justice does not, and cannot, exist. Greater confinement. Avoid doing anything that you have reason to believe may result in you being put into greater confinement, jail, prison, etc. Explanation. In a socio-material system dominated by racism, white supremacy, all non-white people are confined, retarded, and restricted in thought, speech, and action, at all times, in all places, and in all areas of activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war/counter-war. Too many victims of racism spend too much time and energy in greater confinement. Too many jails, prisons, concentration camps, etc., are established for the basic purpose of warehousing non-white people, including many of the unborn. The white supremacists know that a world system based on racism, white supremacy, requires that substantial numbers of non-white people be greatly restricted in their movements from place to place. The white supremacists restrict the movements and activities of non-white people to keep them idle, and or keep them from becoming constructively self-sufficient. Know and understand that racist men and racist women, white supremacists, collectively, enjoy knowing that non-white people are traditionally and routinely, in large numbers, confined to cages or reservations similar to those of despised or enslaved animals or selected pets. They seem to associate dark-skinned, non-white, people with creatures or things that are suitable for cages, sits, coops, chains, cuffs, ropes, shackles, stalls, yokes, and all forms of acute and harsh ghettoization. Non-white people have been directly or indirectly trained to spend much of their existence in a condition of restriction of movement according to the desires, dictates, and plans of the white supremacists of the known universe. Knowing and understanding this to be true, it is best and correct for all non-white people to avoid doing or saying anything that they believe will result in unnecessary or non-constructive restrictions on their ability to move about at will. The racists make certain that substantial numbers of non-white people exist under conditions that will most likely cause them to do things that will give the racists an excuse to put them in greater confinement. The racists cause this by using a variety of tactics, many of them based on deception, through pretension. Examples: pretending to provide economic progress, while working to hinder it. Pretending to provide educational progress, while working to hinder it. Pretending to produce justice, while working to continue, and refine, the practice of injustice. Do your best to guarantee yourself, and all others, that you will never willfully and deliberately do anything that you know will likely result in your being put into greater confinement for being guilty of anything other than making a compensatory investment request. Making a compensatory investment request means to ask white people for whatever help that you need in order to produce constructive results. These requests may include receiving necessary food, shelter, transportation, medical care, constructive teaching, etc. When asking white people for constructive help, compensatory investment requests always do so with courtesy, and without using violence, or the threat of violence against them or their helpers. A universal compensatory investment request applies to every non-white person in the known universe who, because of the harmful effects of white supremacy, racism, is not adequately able to constructively help himself or herself. It is incorrect to make a universal compensatory investment request if the person making the request has the ability, mental and physical, to do the constructive work that will result in his or her receiving the constructive help that he or she needs. Notes: it is correct to make this request only from white people, and or only from those white people that are likely engaging in the practice of white supremacy. It is incorrect to rob or to steal from anyone for any reason. The system of white supremacy is designed to force, or entice non-white people to rob, steal, or so-called beg. It is not designed to allow non-white people to be self-supporting. Since robbing and stealing is worse than begging, it is better to be punished for so-called begging, for justice, than punished for robbing or stealing. It is better to want for things, or beg for what one needs, than to rob or steal to get those things or to satisfy those needs. Considering all things, non-white people should most certainly not be guilty of robbing or stealing. The person who chooses to make a compensatory investment request must be prepared to suffer ridicule, greater deprivation, and possibly death because of doing so. When talking about the best and correct thing to say about greater confinement, jail, prison, etc., say the following: during the existence of white supremacy, any non-white person who willfully and deliberately does anything that he or she knows is likely to result in being put into greater confinement, jail, prison, etc., should expect to be put into greater confinement, and while there, should expect no mercy, no comfort, and no help in being released. Question: what is the correct thing to do about a non-white person who uses deadly violence or the threat of deadly violence to gain money and/or material possessions from a non-white person? Answer: as long as racism, white supremacy, exists, a non-white person who uses deadly violence or the threat of deadly violence to gain money and/or material possessions, rob, from a non-white person, should be put into total greater solitary confinement until such time as he or she chooses to kill himself or herself, or until such time as all violence by non-white people against non-white people comes to an end throughout the known universe. Notes: the material ability for killing himself or herself should be, at all times, present with the person within his or her total greater solitary confinement circumstance. Those who are willing to kill for fun, glory, or material gain, should be willing to kill themselves for doing so, unless it is necessary. Avoid saying the names or titles of any persons involved in the non-just killing of people. Speak against all non-just killing any place in the known universe. Always suggest that all people who willfully, deliberately, and non-justly kill other people be greatly influenced to also kill themselves. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, racism, the truth about some killings of people, by people, is often difficult to know. Therefore, in matters of people killing people, it is best and correct to avoid naming the names or titles of people who may or may not be involved in such killings. It is best and correct to make remarks about parts of a compensatory code that apply to the killings in a manner that produces the most constructive thoughts about what to do and say about the killings. Note: according to compensatory logic, people who kill people while raping them, robbing them, or attempting to enslave them, should expect no mercy, and no help from anyone, any place, at any time, forever. Question: what is the correct thing to say that should be done with a person who willfully, deliberately, maliciously, and unjustly kills any person? Answer: such person should be put into maximum emergency compensatory, solitary, confinement, and kept with the same, or similar, tool, weapon, or substance that he or she used to kill that other person, until he or she decides to use that tool, weapon, or substance to kill himself or herself, or until there is an end to all killing of persons, by persons, every place in the known universe. Notes: compensatory constructive isolation means an almost total isolation from people or creatures except to be given very carefully chosen reading or study materials that are of constructive value. All time used should be of constructive value in preparation for a constructive future. The aforementioned suggestion is correct when advocated and supported according to the concept and practice of compensatory law, and should be applied to all people. Those persons who are opposed to the aforementioned maximum emergency compensatory, solitary, confinement concept should not be opposed to anyone, including himself or herself, being the next person who is unjustly killed. If you, for any reason, choose to plan to willfully and deliberately kill a person, and you do so, make it your duty to kill yourself, rather than surrender to those persons, who, for any reason, did not approve of the killing. Explanation: according to compensatory logic, it is incorrect for any person to plan, and willfully and deliberately kill another person, and then, directly or indirectly, ask for mercy from other persons who did not approve of the killing. If you choose to willfully and deliberately kill, or do other harm to a person, intentionally, and, after having done so, you expect someone to speak and or act to defend, or in some way help you, do not do any of the following. 1. Pretend that you did not do what you did. 2. Apologize for having done what you did. 3. Ask for forgiveness for having done what you did. 4. Ask for mercy for having done what you did. 5. Say or imply that you would not do what you did again. Question: is it correct for one person to willfully and deliberately put another person to death, through execution, after putting that person into greater confinement, jail, prison, etc.? Answer: number. Once a person has been put into greater confinement, jail, prison, etc., for having willfully, deliberately, and unjustly killed another person, he or she should be given the choice of continuing to exist in a situation of greater confinement, maximum emergency compensatory solitary confinement, or killing himself or herself while in greater confinement. Explanation: people who willfully, deliberately, and unjustly kill other people, should be given, and should be willing to give themselves, a maximum opportunity to kill themselves. They should be willing to do so in support of compensatory logic, compensatory science, and the law of compensation itself. Question: as long as white supremacy, racism, exists, what is the correct thing to do or say when a white person willfully, deliberately, and unjustly participates in, or, directly or indirectly, helps to promote the killing of, or do serious injury to, a non-white person? Answer: according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is correct to say that the white person should be regarded as a racist war criminal, and, as such, be put into maximum emergency compensatory solitary confinement, and kept there until he or she kills himself or herself, or until such time as no white person is, directly or indirectly, involved in the willful, deliberate, and unjust killing, or serious injury to, a non-white person. Note: white supremacists, racists, are not expected to support this suggestion. If you rape, rob, steal from, unwillfully, deliberately, and unjustly kill any person, white or non-white, do not ask for, expect, or accept any mercy, of any kind, from any person. Explanation: in order to best help make the world the quality of place that it should be, it is extremely important that no person who believes that rape, robbery, theft, and or non-just killing, is in any way to be enacted, supported, ignored, accepted, or allowed to continue. Such activity should be opposed, and compensated for, by every available and constructively effective means possible. Do not seek or expect pity, sympathy, mercy, help, protection, or support of any kind for any person, including yourself, who kills another person, and who does not make an immediate effort to voluntarily tell everyone all that is known all about the killing. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, racism, racist men and racist women, white supremacists, collectively, enjoy making sport, play, and or mystery out of killing people. They make fun, and teach others how to make fun, out of playing games and killing people in secret. Exchanging views about people killing people in secret is one of their most important forms of entertainment. Racist men and racist women regard the discovery of the secret killing of a person by another as exciting, and as one of the greatest games for the production of joy. They particularly enjoy finding, chasing, catching, and punishing a non-white person who has killed a white person, and who tried to keep the killing a secret. According to compensatory logic, it is non-just and incorrect for any person in the known universe to keep the killing of a person secret. How, why, when, where, and by whom. It is also incorrect for any person to make sport, play, or entertainment out of the killing of, or out of the secrecy involved in, the killing of any person. Notes: the person who is willing to unjustly kill another person, and who does so, should also be willing to say that he or she did the unjust killing, and should be willing to go into a confined space and remain there until he or she gets the will to kill himself or herself. According to compensatory logic, any person who is bold enough and or uncaring enough to willfully, deliberately, and unjustly kill another person, should be bold enough, and or uncaring enough, to willfully, deliberately, and efficiently kill himself or herself. It is correct to always be willing to stand by your work. Question: what is the correct way to regard any act of suicide by a non-white person? Answer: according to compensatory counter-racist logic, any non-white person who commits so-called suicide while he or she is subject to the system of white supremacy, racism, is a victim of a racist war crime, and every white person who participates in the practice of white supremacy, racism, is a racist war criminal guilty of the crime of murder. Try to put as much distance as you can between yourself and any persons, white or non-white, whom you have reason to believe will seek to do unjust harm to you. Explanation: avoid being in their presence. When you see them coming, to go somewhere else, always try to be where they are not. Avoid saying anything to them that is not necessary. If you cannot get away from them, make plans for ways and means to protect yourself from them by systematically and efficiently being ready to do something that they were not prepared for you to do, that works in your favor, but also produces a constructive result. When possible, and necessary, all conflict should be minimized. One major way to minimize conflict is to minimize all non-constructive contact with the makers of conflict. No contact, no conflict. Do not confuse comfort with justice. Balance between people. Do not accept comfort as a substitute for justice, or speak or act as if comfort has the same meaning as justice. Explanation: white supremacists sometimes do things to make many of their victims, non-white people, feel comfortable. They do these things so that their victims will value comfort more than justice. Some of the things or methods used are tasty or sweet food or drinks, thrill-producing or relaxing drug, chemicals, loud sounds, and or soothing sounds, both intended to prevent or hinder constructive thought, speech, and action. Exciting or so-called super-thrilling sexual or anti-sexual, homosexual or lesbian, activities, exciting games and or so-called sports. Emblems, symbols, and attention-producing body ornaments or garments. The use of words in such a manner as to make truth, that which is, appear to be false, that which is not, and to make falsehood appear to be truth. Surroundings or settings that produce the illusion of wealth and or power. Question: what is the basic compensatory counter-racist response to questioning when there is reason to believe that the answer is likely to, directly or indirectly, result in substantial added support to the system of white supremacy, racism? Answer: say, according to compensatory counter-racist logic, I, as a victim of racism, victim of white supremacy, am required to not make any remarks that are likely to, directly or indirectly, result in substantial added support to the system of white supremacy. Question: what is the correct thing to say in response to a person making accusations about anything that you are doing or have done that is required or allowed according to the counter-racist code, and or compensatory logic? Answer: say one or more of the following. I acted according to the counter-racist code. I acted according to compensatory law. I acted according to victims' guaranteed qualification. I acted according to compensatory counter-racist logic. During the existence of white supremacy, racism, do not speak or act as if you expect non-white people to stop fighting and killing each other. Therefore, do all that you can to avoid all contact with non-white people that is not carefully planned and of constructive value. Do all that you can to minimize conflict by minimizing all unnecessary contact. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, racism, the white supremacists, racist men and racist women, collectively, systematically train non-white people to have total contempt for the weaknesses in themselves, both individually and collectively. At the same time, the white supremacists systematically train non-white people to be in total awe of the strengths of the white supremacists. This results in non-white people fighting, killing, and insulting each other out of shame and frustration, of feeling helpless or worthless. When asked if you have ever participated in any criminal activity directly or indirectly associated with race, racism, or counter-racism, say, yes, by being forced to submit to, and cooperate with the system of white supremacy, racism, all of my activities have been criminal. When admitting to any major crimes that you have committed, say, I am, also, guilty of not doing enough to replace white supremacy, racism, with justice, balance between people. When talking about crimes and or criminals, say the following: I am a criminal, and I know of no person who is able to be a criminal, who is not a criminal. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, a criminal is anyone who has committed a crime. A major crime is anything said or done, or not said or done, that results in support for, or defense of, the system of white supremacy in any one or more areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war/counter-war. According to compensatory counter-racist logic, white supremacy, racism, is the crime of crimes, and any person who practices white supremacy is a master criminal, and is guilty of forcing all of his or her victims, non-white people, to support the crime of white supremacy. Support for white supremacy is support for the crime of crimes. When talking about crimes that you may or may not have committed, say the following: the most serious crime that I have committed is to allow myself to be forced to cooperate with the system of white supremacy. Notes: during the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, the system of white supremacy is the universal crime of crimes. As such, it is the greatest, and the most powerful obstruction to the production of justice. If you are asked to participate in a matter of law, and you have reason to believe your participation will not help to produce justice, say the following: I do not understand enough of what should be understood. When, in matters of law enforcement, legal codes, and/or the production of justice, balance between people, you are asked to say something that you have reason to believe will give support, and/or comfort, to persons who practice white supremacy, say the following: I have been told that, as a victim of, a prisoner of, and a slave to, the system of white supremacy, racism, anything that I say or do that gives support and/or comfort to the white supremacists, racist men and racist women, collectively, is a direct or indirect obstruction to the production of justice. Explanation: during the existence of the system of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is the duty of every person in the known universe to resist speaking or acting to give comfort or support to any white supremacists, or to any suspected white supremacist, racist suspect, either directly, or indirectly, in any area of activity. When talking about being judged by a jury of your peers, say, I am not aware of the existence of any of my peers other than, possibly, myself. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, there is reason to believe that no person in the known universe is correctly qualified to judge who is, or is not, a peer of any non-white person, victim of white supremacy, in regards to exact time, exact place, exact circumstance, and exact state of being. Question: what is the best and correct thing to say when you are accused of saying or doing something about white supremacy, racism, that someone says you should not have said or done? Answer: say, let those who are neither white supremacists, nor the subjects of white supremacists, racists, make the correct judgments against what I have said or done. When you make a mistake in your attempts to produce justice, balance between people, by using the so-called legal tools provided, directly or indirectly, by racist men and racist women, blame the mistake on racist men and racist women. When asked which persons know more about how you think than you do, say, the white supremacists. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, everything that a victim of white supremacy, non-white person, thinks, says, or does, is a direct or indirect reaction to whatever it is that the white supremacists are thinking, saying, and doing. Do your best to use all so-called constitutional laws, religious laws, legal customs, etc., only in a manner that best helps to result in the replacement of the system of white supremacy, racism, with the system of justice, balance between people. White supremacy is not a victimless crime. Blame racist man and racist woman for all the things that your offspring does that is incorrect and non-constructive, and offer that blame before the white supremacists blame you, or others. Also, blame them for not giving you the necessary help to guarantee that you and your offspring are, and will be, people who have all of the qualifications for producing justice, correctness, and peace, in all areas of activity. Explanation: during the existence of white supremacy, and according to compensatory counter-racist logic, it is racist men and racist women who dominate and enforce their will against the non-white people of the known universe, not only in some, but in all areas of activity: economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, counter-war. As long as white supremacy, racism, exists, it is logical and correct for the white supremacists to be blamed mostly for whatever any non-white person does, that should not be done. Whenever it is constructive to do so, use the names and or titles given to you by the white supremacists as evidence of what they have claimed as their so-called ownership. Criminal victimization of you. Do this so you can always have some direct evidence to best help support claims that you are entitled to compensation for having been made subject to the system of white supremacy.